Yes, thanks. One of the big innovations in macroeconomic analysis back in the 1970s and the 1980s was the development of what are called dynamic general equilibrium models, which tried to model the complete dynamics of economies in terms that explained everything in terms of decisions by individual households and firms, and clarifying the motives and the beliefs of those agents. And this was a very important advance. Several people got Nobel Prizes for their work on developing these models, but the earliest generation of work of this kind were models that were called real business cycle models. And so back in the 1980s, people believed that to have this kind of rigorous methodology, you had to have models that implied that monetary policy didn't matter for the economy at all, and that could have no effects on any real variables, real activity, real wages, and so on. The work that I was involved with involved developing a new generation of dynamic general equilibrium models that were as rigorous in their methodological foundations, but that now did allow scope for monetary policy to matter for the economy. And this involved generalizing the assumption that markets are perfectly competitive. Introducing imperfect competition was crucial. Introducing delays in the adjustment of both prices and wages in the economy. And these advances in the modeling methodology then allowed monetary policy to be seen to have a central role, and so one could discuss what were better and worse monetary policies, and one could use the models to analyze what good systematic approaches to monetary policy would be like in the context of these models, where the elements of the models could be checked with many things that we observe about actual households and firms in the economy. So forward guidance is the idea that an important part of what central banks do with their policy should be to communicate to people in the private sector what the outlook is for monetary policy in the future. Before the 2000s, it was commonly accepted by central banks that they should make decisions about how to intervene in markets, but they didn't need to talk to the public at all about what they were doing, and certainly not give any hints in advance about what they might do anytime in the future. The idea of forward guidance instead argues that in addition to directly intervening in markets, it's very important what central banks say to people, not just while they're doing it, but to give them an idea of what they would expect to do further in the future, perhaps months in the future, perhaps even a few years into the future. And this additional tool became central when the global financial crisis came in 2008. And the reason is because with the severe distortions of the financial sector, central banks found themselves in a place where intervening to lower short-term nominal interest rates didn't provide enough stimulus to the economy. They could lower short-term nominal interest rates all the way to zero, which many central banks did by the end of 2008 or early in 2009. And they found their economies were still in very serious trouble. There was still deflation, very low levels of economic activity and employment in many places, and the need to do something else became important. And a very important thing that central banks could still do was make commitments about how policy would be conducted further in the future, even if they couldn't lower interest rates immediately. And so this tool of forward guidance that had been discussed and experimented with a small amount before 2008 became a really crucial tool for central banks to have at the end of 2008 and in the years immediately following that. I continue to think that trying to improve the extent to which central banks talk to the public about what they're doing, why they're doing it, and in particular, how things can be expected to unfold further in the future, given their systematic policy framework, would make an important contribution to improving the degree to which central banks can stabilize economies. Some of the very challenging things that have happened recently have included unusual shocks like the effects of COVID on many national economies, and these were very unusual situations that had very big effects on many parts of the economy. But I think that the effectiveness with which central banks could have dealt with these kinds of situations would have been greater if, in responding to the situation, they talked about how the response to this particular type of disturbance fit into a general pattern, general policy targets that the central bank is trying to achieve, even though the exact actions needed to achieve the targets would change depending which kinds of disturbances were affecting the economy.